I mean, this kid had DC in fear. I mean, this kid just didn't care. He was murdering everything that was moving.
When Poe hooked up with Wayne, that was the best thing that happened to Poe.
I knew he was lying. I turned to my little man. I gave him the nod. Once I gave him the nod, my little man spent, because he was short so he could stand up in the van. Next thing you heard was the 2 gunshots, bang, bang. The only sound I heard was, him releasing his breath, his last breath.
Paid in Full went from barely making any noise when it first came out to building one of the biggest cult followings ever, with people especially locked in on Rico, the character Cameron played so memorably.
Hey, get shot every day, B. You be aight. You tough, right?
But as memorable as Rico was on screen, he wasn't even close to how dark the real person behind him actually was, Alpo Martinez. He was dangerous, a ruthless killer, cold, calculating, and downright evil. He was way worse than what the movie showed. Let's get into it. The kidnapping of Donnell Porter. First off, let's talk about the betrayal of Rich Porter, the real-life figure behind Mitch in the movie. In the film, the fallout looks like standard street business, jealousy, money issues, but the real story is far darker and way more tragic. In December 1989, Rich Porter's world completely collapsed. His 12-year-old brother, William Donnell Porter, was kidnapped on his way to school. It didn't take long for word to spread about who was behind it. The crime was soon linked to the Preacher Crew, a brutal Bronx-based gang led by Clarence Preacher Heatley, a man already feared in the streets for torture, nappings, and dozens of murders by the early 1990s.
His name equaled fear. Preacher equaled death.
What they would do is he would vote thumbs up or thumbs down like the Roman gladiator days, and he was the ruler. He would just go like this with the thumb, and that meant kill him.
The kidnappers moved fast. They contacted the family and demanded a massive ransom. First, $500,000, then lowered it to $350,000 once they realized the family couldn't pull off that kind of money together immediately. To prove they were serious, they did something horrifying. On December 6th, they instructed the family to go to a McDonald's on 125th Street and Broadway. Under a bathroom sink, Rich's friend found a coffee cup containing Donnell's rings, a cassette tape, and something no family should ever see, a piece of the boy's right index finger. When they played the tape, the room fell apart. Donnell's young voice could be heard crying, begging for help, screaming in pain.
And then to show that they were serious, they actually cut off his little brother's finger.
The very next day.
The next day.
Him and I, he explained to me the very next day, right?
They cut off his little brother's finger. Darnell's finger, and sent it to him just to show they were.
But they didn't send it to him, but they left it in a McDonald's on Broadway in 125th Street and called his house and said there's something to go look, and he sent somebody over there, and that's what they came back with.
Desperate, Rich went into survival mode. He reached out to a major player named Fritz, who fronted him 30 kilos of coke so he could flip it fast and raise the ransom money. But Harlem was already crawling with cops and federal agents. Moving that much product quietly was almost impossible. The pressure was closing in from every direction. With nowhere else to turn, Rich leaned on the one person he thought he could trust, Alpo Martinez. That decision sealed his fate. On January 3, 1990, Alpo lured Rich into a van with his associate, Big Head Gary. Alpo believed Rich had been overcharging him on cocaine prices, and whether that was true or just an excuse didn't matter. Once Rich was inside the van, Alpo gave the signal. Rich was shot in the head and chest, then dumped near Orchard Beach in the Bronx. He was only 24 years old. When his body was found, he still had $2,239 in cash in his pocket. AZ Faison later recalled seeing Alpo that same night, with scratches on his face.
Alpo gets out with his man, I guess that was Gary. Shake hands. I'm like, damn, what happened to your face, bro? Scratches on his face. He said, nah, my girl out of DC, she bugging out. I said, damn, them shits look fresh, huh?
The next morning, when word spread that Rich had been killed, Alpo pulled up, put on a show, shedding a few tears in front of everyone, then drove off like nothing happened. He even had the nerves to show up at Rich's wake, signing the guest book in huge, bold letters. Years later, Alpo would casually admit to killing Rich, saying it wasn't personal, it was just business.
I was asking him like, yo, Rich, where did you get that coke from, man? That was good, because I wanted to make him comfortable. That was good as He's like, I got it from my connect. From there, I knew he was lying. I turned to my little man. I gave him the nod. Once I gave him the nod, my little man spent, because he was short so he could stand up in the van. Next thing you heard was the 2 gunshots, bang, bang.
With Rich dead, the kidnappers knew the ransom was never coming. Donnell was killed too. He was beaten to death and dumped less than a mile from where his brother's body had been left. And the most sickening twist of all was that the kidnapping had been orchestrated by Rich's own uncle, Johnny Apple Porter. That alone makes the real story far more tragic than anything the movie showed. The DC Kingpin Hit. But the film also leaves out another major part of Alpo's story, his expansion beyond Harlem. The movie keeps everything centered in New York, but in reality, Alpo's reach stretched into Washington, D.C. One of the biggest figures there was a drug legend named Frey. According to street accounts, Frey planned to have Alpo killed. When Alpo found out, he didn't wait around. Instead of handling it personally, he paid for the problem to disappear. He allegedly gave a street figure $9,000 in cash, half a kilo of coke, and a 9mm handgun to take Frey out. Frey was shot at least 6 times in his car, and his body was left right at the entrance of Washington Hospital Center. Alpo wasn't just dangerous in Harlem, and he wasn't afraid to outsource violence when it suited him. Wayne Silk Perry. That leads to the biggest thing the movie completely misses, Wayne Silk Perry. In the film, Rico is portrayed as the muscle. In real life, Alpo didn't become the muscle, he hired it. Wayne Silk Perry was the ghost of the film, the reason Alpo transformed from a flashy Harlem enforcer into a cold-blooded kingpin with national reach. Some even argue that without Wayne Perry, there wouldn't be a paid-in-full story to tell. His criminal path started unbelievably early, almost to the point where it sounds unreal. By the age of 12, back in 1974, Wayne Perry was already being linked to his first murder. By 16, he had moved on to robbing banks. School was never going to hold him for long. While attending Wilson High School in D.C., Perry got into a fight with his baseball coach. The situation exploded, and Perry beat the coach unconscious with a bat. That single incident got him kicked out and permanently banned from every public school in Washington, D.C. From there, his reputation only grew darker. In 1984, Perry was jumped by a gang on a street corner. Instead of running, he fought back, violently. He beat one of the attackers to death with a bat right in front of police officers. Because he was attacked first, the charge was reduced to manslaughter. He served only a few years in Lorton's Youth Center 1, a facility notorious for turning troubled teens into hardened criminals. If anything, prison didn't slow him down. It refined him. When Perry came home in 1987, he was different. He had become a professional killer. His style set him apart. No drive-bys, no spraying bullets and hoping for the best. Perry walked directly up to his targets and shot him in the head, often multiple times to make sure there was no doubt. His reputation became so terrifying that dealers paid him just to stay alive. Some people wouldn't even wear flashy jewelry around him, afraid it might trigger something.
I mean, this kid had DC in fear. I mean, this kid just didn't care. He was murdering everything that was moving.
Everything changed in 1989 when his path crossed with Alpo Martinez. Alpo had just arrived in Washington, D.C. and was already making noise, but he was also vulnerable. He'd been shot and barely survived. He needed protection. That introduction came through Shelton Shorty Pop Watkins, a 15-year-old killer who also happened to be affiliated with a go-go group Junkyard Band. At the time, Perry was locked up on an attempted murder charge with bail set at $10,000. Alpo paid it without hesitation. That moment sealed their alliance. Alpo had the money and the drugs. Perry had the violence. Together, they became unstoppable. They ruled DC through fear. Any problem Alpo had, Perry handled it personally. Rivals disappeared. Threats were erased. When Alpo wanted revenge on the men who had previously shot him, Perry made sure it happened. When another rival, Matthew Blake, became an issue, Shorty Pop executed him in December 1989 on Alpo's orders. Nobody questioned it. One of the most infamous crimes tied to their reign involved a witness named Elvita Hopkins. She had agreed to testify against Perry for the murder of James Frog Henson. That decision sealed her fate. Perry and Alpo kidnapped her. Alpo drove their now notorious murder van, blasting N.W.A.'s A B is a B, while Perry stabbed Hopkins repeatedly before shooting her in the head. That message kept spreading. When Brooklyn drug figure Demencio Benson disrespected Alpo, they decided to make an example of him too. After a basketball game at Kennedy Park, surrounded by hundreds of people, Alpo gave Shorty Pop the signal. Shorty Pop walked straight up and shot Benson in the forehead in broad daylight. No one spoke to the police.
I mean, this kid had DC in fear. I mean, this kid just didn't care. He was murdering everything that was moving.
When Poe hooked up with Wayne, that was the best thing that happened to Poe.
Even among killers, Perry's brutality stood out. One story that circulated involved an underling named Thomas Dozier. Perry ordered him to kill a young woman named Evelyn Carter simply because she rejected him. Dozier shot her twice in the chest and returned, thinking the job was done. Perry was furious. To make his point, he walked up to a random man using a payphone and shot him in the head. Then he calmly said, "That's how you kill somebody." Their reign finally collapsed in 1991 when Alpo was arrested. Facing serious time, Alpo cooperated with authorities. His testimony dismantled everything. Perry was convicted and sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms with no possibility of parole. He was eventually sent to ADX Florence in Colorado, one of the most secure prisons in the world. Years later, during an interview with FBI agent Dan Riley, Perry admitted something even more chilling. He claimed the real number of people he had killed was over 100. In prison, he converted to Islam and took the name Nkosi Shaka Zuluel, killing his own hitman. Another clear example of how much of a traitor Alpo really was, something Paid in Full completely skipped over, was the murder of his own right-hand man, Garrett Terrell. Terrell was a major DC drug dealer and one of the people directly involved in Rich Porter's real-life murder alongside Alpo. But like everyone else around Alpo, Gary eventually became disposable. At some point, Alpo decided Terrell had to go. The reasons are still debated. Some say Gary knew too much about Rich's murder, others say he disrespected Alpo's wife, but either way, Alpo handled it the same way he handled everything. Alpo picked Gary up and drove around with him, knowing the entire time that a hired hitman was hiding in the backseat of the car. When they pulled over for gas, Alpo casually stepped out to pump, gave a silent signal, and that was it. The hitman shot Gary twice in the head while he sat unsuspecting in the passenger seat. His body was later dumped in a wooded area like trash. That murder showed a clear pattern. Alpo systematically eliminated anyone who had dirt on him, anyone who could potentially talk, or anyone he even felt might become a problem. Loyalty meant nothing to him. If you knew too much, you were dead. If you crossed him, you were dead. If your existence threatened his freedom, you were dead. His downfall. That brings us to the downfall, and where Paid in Full seriously softens the truth. In the movie, Rico gets caught and gives up some information on out-of-town connections to save himself, but there's an implication that Harlem is off limits. The film frames him as a selective rat, someone who still has lines he won't cross. That version of Alpo is fiction. The real Alpo crossed every line imaginable. When the feds finally caught him in 1991, he wasn't facing 20 or 25 years. He was staring straight at the death penalty or life without parole. And the moment his life was on the line, the street code he claimed to live by vanished instantly. To save himself, Alpo turned on the very man who had protected him and helped him build power, Wayne Perry. Alpo didn't hesitate. He testified against Wayne in brutal detail, laying out murders they committed together, how they planned them, and how the organization functioned. His testimony was the nail in the coffin. Because of Alpo, Wayne Perry was sentenced to 5 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. And Alpo didn't stop there. He gave up everyone: soldiers, enforcers, suppliers, the structure, the routes. He didn't just cooperate, he dismantled an entire criminal infrastructure piece by piece to save himself. In exchange, Alpo secured a 35-year plea deal and entered witness protection. The movie makes it seem like he only confessed to a couple of major murders, 2 or 3 at most. The real number was far darker. Alpo confessed to 14 murders as part of his plea bargain. Prosecutors also alleged that his crew was responsible for at least 9 homicides between 1989 and 1991 alone. This wasn't some small-time operation either. Alpo ran a multi-state coke distribution network spanning New York, Washington, D.C., and Brooklyn. He used contract killers to do his dirty work and then had those same killers executed to erase loose ends. The movie Paid in Full ends with Rico behind bars, his story wrapped up neatly with prison bars and consequences. But real life didn't stop there. The true story of Alpo Martinez has one last chapter, and it's easily the strangest, most ironic part of his entire saga. Alpo was released from prison in 2015 and quietly entered the witness protection program under the name Abraham Rodriguez. The government moved him all the way to Lewiston, Maine, a quiet, low-key town that couldn't be further from Harlem if it tried. But Alpo was never built for anonymity. The same ego that made Rico so magnetic in the movie was very real in Alpo Martinez. He couldn't stay low, he couldn't just blend in and disappear. Slowly but surely, he started drifting back into Harlem, the very place he had betrayed, testified against, and helped dismantle. And instead of moving carefully, he moved recklessly. People began spotting him around the neighborhood. He was posing, taking pictures with fans, signing autographs. Even worse, he started bragging openly, including claiming responsibility for Rich Porter's murder in videos and conversations. He acted like time had erased everything, like snitching had an expiration date, like the streets would somehow forgive and forget. But the streets don't forget, and karma doesn't miss. Alpo Martinez wasn't taken out by a rival kingpin. He wasn't assassinated by some organized crime syndicate or cartel looking for revenge. Instead, his end came in the most absurd, anticlimactic way possible. On Halloween night in 2021, Alpo was sitting in his Dodge Ram in Harlem when he was shot 5 times. Just like that, it was over.
These are exclusive photos of Alberto Alpo Martinez on previous visits to Harlem in recent years. But his latest visit turned out to be his last. Police were called to Frederick Douglass Boulevard near West 147th Street. A dark red pickup truck crashed into parked cars. The driver was shot 5 times in the chest through the car window and killed.
The man charged with killing him, Shaquem Parker, wasn't a hired hitman or an enemy from the old days. According to reports, the shooting stemmed from a road rage incident. Earlier that summer, Alpo had allegedly clipped Parker with his motorcycle. The same careless arrogance that followed Alpo his entire life showed up one last time. And in the streets, disrespect lingers. This was a man who survived wars with DC Kingpins, Brooklyn shooters, federal indictments, and death row level charges. Yet in the end, he was killed over a personal dispute. He died trying to throw bags of heroin out of his truck window, attempting to ditch evidence even as bullets tore through him. Alpo's entire trajectory was chaos, danger, betrayal, paranoia, and ego all wrapped into one reckless life. And even though history remembers him as one of the biggest traitors the streets ever produced, his name never disappeared. If anything, it became immortalized. Paid in Full played a massive role in that. Cameron's portrayal of Rico made the character stand out among the film's 3 leads, not because he was honorable, but because he was flashy, charismatic, careless, and unpredictable. That energy came straight from Alpo Martinez himself. Young, wild, rich, and completely out of control.
Hey, get shot every day, B. You be You tough, right?
Hip-hop never let his name fade either. Over the years, Alpo has been name-dropped by some of the biggest artists in the game. Jay-Z, 50 Cent, Meek Mill, Future, and many others have referenced him as a symbol of street mythology, hustle culture, and cautionary excess. His story became part of rap folklore. Even Nas mentioned him multiple times, most notably in his 1994 classic Memory Lane, Sittin' in the Park, where Nas listed Martinez alongside other notorious drug gangs and figures from that era. His impact on hip-hop also turned personal. Alpo had a son he didn't meet until adulthood, and that son is now an aspiring rapper named Paparazzi Poe. Shortly before Alpo's death, Paparazzi Poe released a new single titled Brick Squad Monopoly.